If you were to look at a map of the Pacific Northwest and a map of New England, you may spot that there are lots of names that you have in common. Portland, Salem, Burlington, Newport, Albany, Springfield, and then if you look over the Midwest, and you've also got Detroit,
Des Moines,
Toledo, and Milwaukee. So, what exactly is that?
Hooey hooey tum tum.
When Americans first saw the Willamette Valley, they wrote extensively about its beauty and how it seemed that it was almost made for farming. Of course, what they didn't know is that this was only possible because of the controlled annual burns employed by the natives. So, when the natives came the next year to keep doing what they had been doing for the past several thousand years, the white man came and shot them, thinking that the Indians were trying to burn down their camp, when in reality, it was because of these burning that the land was so beautiful.
This is due to a fundamental difference between white and native understandings of the land. Now, former activist for the American Indian movement, Russell Means, discusses this right here.
One must understand that to an Indian, ownership of the land is a foreign concept. The earth is our grandmother, who provides us with everything we need to survive. How can you own your grandmother? How can you sell her? How does a piece of paper that you probably can't read prove ownership of something that can't be owned? Even if you're white, and you think you really own some land, try skipping property tax payments for a few years.
You see, for the white man, wilderness is viewed as an enemy for the powerful forces of civilization to struggle against and to fight. The white man's values are so insistent upon settling down and building farmhouses. So natives who've been moving around for thousands of years and setting stuff on fire to protect their food supply, they seem suddenly wild and out of control. They must be civilized by none other than me, the awesome, cool white man. Uncle Sam. We love you, Uncle Sam.
Moving on a couple of decades, the 1870s and 1880s, the old settlers have had children in the Northwest, and the state of Oregon and territories of Washington and Idaho are being viewed more like real homes. While literature previously had been made with the intention of appealing to Eastern audiences, now Northwestern literature tried to make home seem much more appealing. Adela M. Parker, in 1894, had this to say, that the West should unfalteringly follow the East in fashions and ideals would be as false and fatal as that America should obey the standards of Europe. However, this literature commonly ignored any of the actual environmental or social realities of the Northwest, using, quote, a transplanted set of literary techniques and attitudes. Take a look at Samuel L. Simpson's 1868 poem, Beautiful Lament. On the roaring waste of ocean shall thy scattered waves be tossed. Mid the surge's rhythmic thunder shall thy silver tongues be lost. Oh, with thy glimmering rush of gladness, mocks this turbid life of mine, racing to the wild forever down the sloping paths of time. I know I'm a real orator, but question, does any of this really invoke Willamette? I mean, he might as well have been talking about a creek in New England, the Midwest, or Kazakhstan, and that isn't entirely without mistake. Really, up until the 1920s or so, the integration of the West into Eastern institutions and norms was very important to the government. Speak English, not your barbaric native tongue, and not even that useless Shnakwawa. Asian men, black men, native men are all dangerous. It's very difficult to name any black settlers in the early colonial PNW off my head. The only one I could probably think of would be George Washington Bush. Not the former president, of course, but the founder of Centralia, who was a fairly wealthy freeman anyways, and he still had to go through a very difficult process in order to be able to settle in the PNW. White settlers in 1844 signed the Black Exclusion Act, demanding that all black Oregonians leave the territory within 3 years, or else they would be whipped, quote, no more than 39 times. Then, when Oregon became a state in 1859, settlers voted 8-1 to continue the exclusion. Though it became much less enforced after the Civil War, it remained on the books until the 1920s, and only in 2002 would Oregon finally remove all references to it in the Constitution.
Settlers coming to Northwest wanted to recreate this sort of familiarity and home-like feeling of their old home city. But of course, devoid of any, disliked influences. I mean, they can exist, right? They can exist. Just not, here. The Northwestern Colonial Project for many settlers was about creating a perfected version of their home in the East. For this, you can see all the New Englander city names I mentioned in the intro, as well as one of Seattle's older names, New York Alfkai. I probably terribly butchered. I'm terrible at Chinook jargon. My apologies. And New York obviously being after the city itself, New York City, back east, and Alfkai being a Chinook word meaning future. So, New York in the future. I'd like to bring up Chief Seattle's...
Whoa, no way! It's editing right here, and the rest of the footage on this ended up kind of like dog water. But speaking of Chief Seattle's speech, I actually made a whole video about the speech. Now it's probably fake and not even real. You should watch that. But regardless, so the reason I bring this up is because it talks about how the white man is a lot more willing to wander from his grandfather's grave. Oh, actually, it's convenient. I have a Swedish flag in my room. Look at that. And view the dead as literally like disappearing from the earth and going into the heavens and the stars and never really coming back. He also says the natives are a lot more interconnected with the land because every single part of the land has been touched at one point or another by a native. Anyway, this all segues into perhaps my favorite quote of all time from my main man Luther, Standing Bear. Let's give it up, everyone. Clap. Yeah. The white man does not understand the Indian for the reason that he does not understand America. He is far too removed from its formative processes. The roots of his tree of life have not yet grasped the rock and the soil. The white man is still troubled with primitive fears. He still has in his consciousness the perils of the frontier continent, some of its vastness not yet having yielded to its questing footsteps and inquiring eyes. He shudders still with the memory of the loss of his forefathers upon its scorching deserts and forbidding mountaintops. The man from Europe is still a foreigner and an alien, and he still hates the man who questioned his path across the continent. But in the Indian, the spirit of the land is still vested. It will be until the other men are able to divine and meet its rhythm. Men must be born and reborn to belong. Their bodies must be formed of the dust of their forefathers' bones.